Well, our correspondent Benedicte Paviot is in London. She's been listening to Cummings' testimony and we can talk to her now. Benedicte, some pretty explosive allegations there by Johnson's former aide, aren't they?
By any standards, any country standards, these are explosive allegations. They're not being made about just the past. They're actually being made effectively about the present. Let's remember that this is the chief former advisor to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, that he only left Downing Street back in December. We're now in May. The accusations for the last 4 hours before a parliamentary committee are both the gravity, the consistency of these allegations is extraordinary. We had a taste of things to come from Mr. Cummings' Twitter feed, but when Mr. Cummings says there was no sense of urgency about the pandemic until the last week of February, that the national lockdown should have happened in early March. He paints a picture consistently of chaos, of incompetence at the highest level. He has repeatedly said now, aimed his fire not just at the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but at the Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Matt Hancock, who is in office, is expected to give in 2 weeks' time any reply to these allegations. Can we wait another 2 weeks? Can the country wait another 2 weeks for this response? We think there's probably another hour or two at least to go in this. I mean, he says there were some brilliant people, but he says there was no preparation, there was no plan, that the health secretary had decided that there should be 100,000 target of tests and tracing. So he interfered repeatedly, that the Prime Minister thought that the threat posed by COVID was exaggerated, that he was prepared to go on live television and be injected with it. This is catastrophic for the government and for the Prime Minister. And yet we need to remember that this is a former insider posing as an outsider, and we have to ask questions about Dominic Cummings' motivation. Is he there for vengeance? Is he there to really help the committee, the country and the government learn the lessons of how to face a pandemic?
And Benedicte, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has been responding to all of this today. He's in the House of Commons. Let's have a listen to a little of that.
The handling of this pandemic has been one of the most difficult things this country has had to do for a very long time. And none of the decisions have been easy. To go into a lockdown is a traumatic thing for a country. To deal with a pandemic on this scale has been appallingly difficult. And we've at every stage tried to minimise loss of life, to save lives, to protect the NHS. And we have followed the best scientific advice that we can.
Benedicte Paviot, what do you make of the response there by the Prime Minister?
Well, clearly Boris Johnson very worried, as the government knew it was worried in the run-up to this. I think the accusations are of such a gravity. This is going to absolutely dominate the media. It will shock, surprise, greatly worry the British public in general, let alone those 128,000 people's families who have died from COVID in the United Kingdom. So the burning question is this. Given the serious accusations made today by Dominic Cummings, who only left Downing Street, let's remember, in December, when he says senior ministers, officials and advisors like me fell disastrously short of the standards that the public should expect, and that the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has lied repeatedly, should have been fired, that the Prime Minister, he says, alleges the Prime Minister almost fired Matt Hancock last spring. Can the independent public inquiry into the government's handling of the COVID pandemic start only, as announced a few weeks ago, in spring 2022? How on earth can the government wait in the light of these serious, repeated accusations that everybody can watch, will watch, some will discover later on when they come back from work and in the coming days? The questions are far too serious. This is very grave and an absolute crisis for Downing Street, for this government and for this Prime Minister, Boris Johnson.
Benedicte Paviot in London, thank you very much indeed.